All right. So excited. Let me get our guest in. What's going on? Hey, Kristen. I need to get our guest in. It's the hair for me too, sis. Like, I didn't know she was gonna do me like this because now I'm finna cut all the way up. Like, no chill. All right, let me get our guest in. Hey,
Hi,
how are you?
good. How are you doing?
I'm good. So people are just going to be, coming in as they please. So we can just get started and I'll save it to our IGTV as well as upload it to our YouTube.
Okay. I was cracking up, by the way, because you were like, it's the hair for me. And I was like, yes.
Listen, I didn't expect it to come out like this. So I'm just so excited about it. But hello everyone and welcome to Freedom Revamped. I am the founder, Kourtney, and today we have with us Miss Katryna Howard, also known as Cat Daddy across the social medias. So for those of you who don't know, Freedom Revamped is a platform dedicated to helping others find their sense of freedom as well as discover their God-given talents. And today we have Katryna with us talking about self-love, which I feel is a huge part of freedom journey. So I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, perfect. So like you mentioned, Katrina, cat daddy if you're nasty. I also got my cat, so a lot of people close to me, and people that I work with call me Cat. But yeah, a little bit about me. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Um, I'd like to describe myself as the plug to connect people, like bringing community together, as well as, just being my friend and family's hype woman. So I really thrive off connecting people to one another and helping people reach their full potential. I'm a dancer as well, and I'm a Bay Area native, so I'm based here in Oakland.
Yes. Well, I'm super excited about this conversation. We talk about self-love a lot here on this platform, and I love to see the different perspectives that our guests bring. But the first question I'm going to ask you, which I ask everyone, is how would you define freedom? And based on your definition, how do you practice freedom?
Ooh. How I define freedom, liberation comes to mind. I think it's liberation like without constraint, without restraint, without oppression. So really being free in that sense. And I think even if you look at society now, it's really thinking about who is at the bottom if you think about male versus female, the LGBTQ community, people who might come from lower income communities. Like we really aren't free until everyone has the same access to those resources, right? So I think freedom really thinks about too, how are you creating and unlocking opportunities for the rest of your community. So the way I've been practicing that, I think even more so right now, is just being real with my own privilege, acknowledging when I'm showing up and when I'm not, and having people hold me accountable to that. So, yeah, I think it's really hard to shout at the top of the mountain and be like, all right, freedom, like we're free, right? But it really comes down to the fact, like, if everyone's not free, then what does freedom even really mean? So, what does liberation mean?
True, I definitely agree. It's been so much going on in the world with social injustice and systemic racism and the
So much.
president of the United States that
Did you
like
watch
for
the
me
debate last night? That was just like, we
I
can't call that a
yes,
debate.
I watched it. I was just shaking my head the entire time. It was sad to watch, honestly. But I've just been having to look internally to find freedom like inside myself in order to get through everything that's been going on lately. But the reason I feel like self-love is like a huge part of the freedom journey is because like I feel like when you don't truly love yourself, you're kind of trying to give into what other people think you should be, and in that sense, you aren't free. So
Yeah.
self-love is, for me, was definitely and always will be a journey because I'm a constantly evolving person. So I do want to ask you, at the beginning of your self love journey, how was it for you? Like before you reached the person you are today, how was your view of yourself and how was your love for yourself?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna just say what you just said earlier about you're constantly evolving. That's exactly how I feel about self-love. I think it's easy to think, okay, I'm going to attain a certain level of this once I get here, right? And you might feel more comfortable with it at certain parts of your journey and everything. But I definitely think it's continuous and there's
Yeah,
going to be new things you learn about yourself, right? All throughout your lifetime. I'm in my late 20s right now. Who knows what happens when I reach 30? Like, I don't know what that's going to look like, right? But yeah, I think for me, self love really starts with self awareness and thinking about being present in myself. And so, what I mean by that is having moments to reflect, really having moments to be introspective. I don't think we spend a lot of time with ourselves in that sense. And I think COVID and this pandemic has been really real in that sense to where a lot of us have had to just kind of sit in the mirror and like look at like who am I? What do I actually
yeah,
want? With all of this downtime too, right? So I think it's been a reality check in that sense. But I think for me, it always comes back to how aware am I being with myself and how aware am I being with the surroundings that are impacting my life and allowing me to really think about self-love and how and what that means to me.
yeah. And I think awareness is the hardest part of my self love journey because there are like I feel like the reason we don't want to look inward at who we truly are is because we're afraid to find things that we might not
Ooh.
necessarily like about ourselves. And I know that was a huge part of it for me. I was like, so you really like I was going to therapy when I was told that I had to do that. I was like, so you really want me to sit here and basically nitpick at myself, kind of almost bully myself, like just write down the thing. She literally told me, write down the things you don't like, write down the things you do like. Now, are those things that you don't like changeable or are they a part of you that you can't change? Because if not, you need to accept those things. And I was like, girl, I'm not doing that, but I had to for my sake.
Yeah.
So, self awareness was definitely the hardest part of my self love journey. So, what would you say? I mean, yeah, self awareness was the hardest part of my self love journey. What would you say was the hardest part of your self love journey?
Mm, I think the hardest part for me and still now is just realizing um, that I'm not for everybody, and being
Mm,
okay with that. And what I mean by
yeah,
that is my own superpower, and we each have our own superpowers as to why we exist, why we show up in the world, why we are who we are. And that doesn't come instantaneously. I think to your point, there's a lot of reflection, a lot of awareness, a lot of oh shit, let me sit with this. Why am I moving the way I'm moving, or why do I do these things? Right, asking yourself those questions. Um, but for me, it really came down to like past relationships and understanding, okay, this isn't working out. Why do I feel maybe so attached to a certain person? Not
mm-hmm,
necessarily dependent, but why do I feel so attached to a certain person? And then coming to the realization that really that starts within myself. And if I'm not truly happy or finding or giving that same love to myself before I give that to someone else, then,
yeah,
you know, it doesn't start anywhere besides with yourself first. And I think it can be easy to also be very critical, right? And think, oh, that's being selfish, or oh, I'm thinking too much about self. But really, I think it's so much harder to go there with just you than it is to focus on other people. So I think for me, just coming back to the idea that I'm not for everybody, and that's okay.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think that is the hardest part because before I started loving myself and walking fully in who I am, I would, like I said, I would do a lot of people pleasing. And once I started to shift into who Kourtney actually is, I lost a lot of people along the way. So that was hard because I was like, am I doing the right thing? Because it seems like in the process of it, I'm losing people, but I had to realize that those people were only in my life for that chapter, that it was time for me to move on, and that for my for my betterment, honestly. So
Yeah.
self-love is like, I feel like we have to take these self-love journeys, obviously, because there's a point, or at least from, I can only speak for myself, there was a point where I necessarily didn't love myself, and I had to come into a realization of that. So would you say that there was a moment of realization where you were like, I really need to learn to love myself? And if so, what was that moment like for you?
I just got goosebumps because it took me back to the exact moment in time. And when you sent me over questions beforehand, it just immediately came to mind like what there's been multiple journeys, right? But I think one distinct journey that sticks out to me is I was, kind of going back to relationships. I was in a very toxic relationship with someone, and I lost a lot of myself, and I gave a lot of myself to this person without really having that reciprocated back, and just being lost in this web of lies and their narcissist's view of their life and not really taking accountability. And so for me, I think it was in January of 2019. I had cut ties, but obviously that can kind of come back in and out, right? You never know when ex-bay is
Yeah.
going to try to make their way back into your life. But this time I finally kind of cut that loose, and I did a solo trip to Mexico City for my birthday. I'm an Aquarius. So in January of 2019, I took a solo trip. I went alone. My mom looked at me so crazy. She's like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? Why are you going by yourself? I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. Like, I need this. And I was
Yeah.
so proud of myself for just going out there and having just time with myself, and it was almost my way of reclaiming my power back, because I had been kind of lost in this other person for a while. That going on that trip and being completely disconnected from um, home felt really good. So I was able to be in this new city, meet strangers, connect with people in a way that if I probably went with someone else, probably wouldn't have happened so organically,
Yeah.
right? So I think that also just taught me another layer of self-love is be intentional with how you spend time with yourself, and don't be scared. And if you feel scared,
Yeah.
it's probably for a good reason, right? So for me, taking that trip and being there solo was incredible, and I'm glad I did it. And X Bay is not in the
Yeah.
picture. He's gone. He's out.
For me, I think my journey, like my reasons for not having as much love for myself as I should, came from my dad not being in my life. So I did notice that growing up, and I'm only about to turn 19 on Sunday, but I did notice that I would
Wow.
like,
Happy early birthday.
thank you. But I noticed that like in the short time I like would cling to people trying to fill in that gap of my
Mm,
dad not being in my life. And then when those relationships didn't work out because I was either trying to force them or they just weren't right, then I would be like, oh my gosh, it's me. And it sort of was me. It wasn't me, it was the decisions I was making.
yeah.
So coming into that and then accepting the fact that the reason my dad isn't in my life wasn't my fault was also a huge part of me accepting myself and loving myself, because once I stopped blaming myself for things I couldn't control, then I started to have much more control over the things I could control. So
Yes.
that was what my self-love journey has been like. And I mean, obviously it's continuing on. Like we said, we're evolving people.
And you mentioned,
But
Kourtney, you mentioned therapy earlier. I wanted to just amplify that because I think
yeah.
especially within the Black community, us as Black women, we don't have as much access to talk about therapy, especially within our
Right.
family. Hearing you talk about your dad, I that hits home so hard. It resonates so much because I too have a really struggling relationship with my dad. And being back at my parents' house now during the pandemic, I've continued therapy. It's one of the things that have been constant, even though I'm unemployed. I was like, this is the one thing I'm prioritizing. I don't care what comes up, but I really need to
Yeah.
be on it with my mental health, right? And that was one thing that we really unpacked was um, things that I had not really realized being a kid, or things that I realized, okay, now as an adult and I'm back in my parents' house, what does that look like? And what are things that are resurfacing for me that I didn't even know were kind of like attachment issues, or things that were resentment in my relationship with my dad that might show up in different ways in how I interact with people. So I think that definitely, there's a connection there between how you love yourself, how you treat yourself with kindness, and really seeking out help from others. And I think therapy is such a great way to do that.
Yes. And I think one thing I did learn in therapy, and I'm still learning to practice, is that the way other people treat you or the way they think about you or whatever should not affect how you treat yourself or how you feel about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, like I said, a lot of my self-worth has been predicated on how other people, more specifically my dad, um, treated me or felt about me. But learning that what they do has nothing to do with me, but has everything to do with how they feel about themselves has been
Yep.
a huge part of it. And I mean, I say that and I have to
Best to
continue.
control the situation, right? You can try your best to try
Yes,
to control and try to like put yourself in that situation to be like, let me help you. But it's like, unless, they even want the help themselves, like you can only really control how you're moving through life.
right. So I just try to, like, I say it now, but when situations come up, I have to remind myself because I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I'm like, okay, Kourtney, this is not about you. This is about them. So, but besides I know you just mentioned the trip to Mexico. What was the pivotal, I don't want, well, yeah, what was the pivotal moment in your life that you actually noticed that, hey, I actually do love myself. There actually are some things about me that I love. And then the moments where you were like, okay, these are things about me that I can change to fit who I want to be.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I think I started paying attention more to physically, like my body. Growing up, I didn't always have like the best relationship with my body. I went through, like many kids do, like an awkward phase. I had acne all over my face. Was struggling with weight. Got stretch marks really early on, like inner thighs, outer thighs, on my butt. Um, and I think just things like that as a kid, I was very like ashamed of and didn't know, like that didn't seem like love to me, or that didn't seem like what society was portraying as beautiful, or features that felt attainable, right? So now I think what's really helped me kind of connect back to my self-love journey was reconnecting with dance. So as a dancer, um, I grew up dancing, but I think it was one of those things that my parents put me in. It was a hobby. I loved doing it, but I also reached a point when I was a teenager where it just kind of fell off. And so it wasn't until as an adult I started getting back into it. And so about 2 years ago now, I took my first dance class in heels. Let me tell you, when I tell you, I, one, was scared as hell. Two, just never felt like so empowered and so just powerful and like such a badass. Just shaking my ass and breaking it down in a pair of heels around, like in a room full of other women. That really showed me, like, okay, there is more that I have to offer here than just my body, how I move, and however I choose to step into my body and show that off is by my choice, by my time. and isn't up to anyone else's discretion. So I think reconnecting with dance in that way really helped me fall back in love with my body and also appreciate the things that maybe I downplayed a lot, like my stretch marks, like having really thick thighs and being like, all right, what do I do? I can't even fit like my pants over my, my butt and my thighs, but just appreciating all of that and then seeing it come to life when I'm moving my body and then being able to connect with other women through that. So it was incredible just hearing women reach out to me and be like, damn, you're killing it. And you just feel so free and liberated when you're dancing. It makes me want to, go out there and try it. And I'm like, yes, like come join me. Obviously with COVID, it's different now, but that was definitely, reconnecting with dance has been one of the things that I'm like, damn, I didn't know I can move my body like this. I didn't know I could just step back into my body and kind of connect mindfully back to, okay, how am I feeling? What am I feeling in my torso, in my legs, in my head, and really just being fully present with my body.
Yes. I kind of struggled with the opposite and sort of still am in the sense that I can't gain weight. And a lot of people are like, girl, be proud of that. But it's like, I feel like I want to. And a lot of that still comes from, like when I was in middle school, I had someone ask me, do you smoke crack? Because like of my size. And I'm just like, no, I don't. But just, I think for me, like I've been saying this entire time, is learning the things that you can control. So just learning and also learning the things that you can't control. So right now, I've been trying to gain weight, nothing's happening. So just accepting my body as it is and loving her in her entirety
Yeah.
has been has been a huge part. And I also applaud all of you who can dance because let's just say I archive all my TikToks because I look a mess. But but just learning, I love how you went back to dance in order to help you learn to love your body and finding things that help us learn to love our bodies and learn to know how our bodies work is a huge part of our self-love journeys. For instance, I do a little yoga and just learning that my body is knows what she's supposed to be doing in that moment. So for instance, I'm a beginner yoga person and I might not be able to do a split like someone who's been doing it for 12 years and learning to be like, okay, well, this is where your body is in this moment. So just allow
Yeah.
her to be how she
Appreciating where
is.
you're at. Yep.
Yes. Yes.
I
So
love that.
I do want to say, besides getting back into dance, how else would you advise people to begin their journeys of self-love? Because I know some people watching this might be in a place where they're like, I'm just not feeling myself lately. So, what advice would you give to someone who is just now beginning their self-love journey?
Yes, that's such a great question. And I don't have all the answers, but I think what I've found that's been working for me, especially right now, because, right, we're in this new normal. A lot of us have never experienced anything like this in our lifetime. So I think even trying to just be gentle with yourself, that there is so much more happening at scale than what we can control. And unfortunately, with this new normal, we're adapting to that. But I think one way I would recommend people to really tap into, like defining self love for them is I I intentionally try to create time for myself to just wander and explore and kind of fantasize, I guess. And I, I think during quarantine, I was kind of nitpicking at myself and thinking like, kind of like snap out of it, Katryna. You need to focus on things, right? But what I unpacked with my therapist was there's something deeper in me that I didn't even realize as far as me connecting back with like younger cat, so like little cat daddy inner child in me, who is craving for something more. And I was like, well, what does she want? Like, I'm a grown ass adult. What does she want? But my
Right.
we're talking and she's like, um, since you're back at your parents' house and there's a lot of things that feel out of your control right now, like you may be overly disciplining yourself given the pandemic and all these things, right? Like we have to stay inside, we have to wear a mask, all these things that are like restricting. And I was already putting extra restrictions on myself. I wasn't giving myself enough time to play and just wander and explore. So for me, I find just let yourself be playful, whatever that looks like to you. So last week I went back to one of the neighborhoods I grew up in my hometown. Forgot my phone, not on purpose. It was definitely by accident. And I almost thought like, fuck, should I go back for my phone? But I didn't. I was like, let me stay unplugged. Let me go back to my neighborhood. And it was extremely nostalgic. I felt so good. I felt like a little kid wandering the streets outside again, looking at my old house, looking at the tree I used to climb, and just let myself be in that moment.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that was a really dope experience that I had with myself and kind of just connecting back to my inner child and being like, I got you. This is kind of bringing you back some memories, right? Like this feels good. So even though so much is happening in the world as far as, Black lives under attack, fucking president is a hot mess, law enforcement, all this stuff, I think as much as we can allow ourselves to just have those moments to play, be goofy, wander, explore, like give yourself that time to just fantasize, and you don't know what that can look like for you and how to reward your own self-love journey with that.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think I find myself going back to the childhood Kourtney by literally just being without caring what my grandma thinks, my little cousin, my aunt, what
Yes.
anyone else in the house thinks. Because I know when I was younger, I used to just run around the house singing all loud and off key. And now I'm just like, okay, let me get back to that because that's what I enjoyed. And now I'm better at it. Back then, I was just a mess. But it's still something that I enjoy, and it allows me to just be free in who I am. So,
And it's
I
giving
think that's good.
compassion to yourself too.
Yes.
Like I think as kids a lot too, I mean, who knows what each of our journeys were, right? Like as a kid, I may have had less time with my parents. I may have been like really heads down in school or whatever it may be, like forced to grow up really fast. So I think there's parts of like yourself as a kid that maybe is deserving and craving and wanting more love. And what better way to give that to yourself than through yourself, like as an adult,
Yes.
and just recognizing like yourself as a kid and being like, I got you, you're good.
Yes. So that is our advice to the viewers. Just allow yourself that compassion and space to grow. Let your inner child shine through you right now. I didn't have any more questions. If anyone else has questions, feel free to drop them right now. But while we're waiting on them to drop them, I always allow my guests on the live to shout out any person or business brand that you believe fits within the topic of self-love or self-care or just freedom in general. So you can have the floor to do that.
Yeah. So I wrote down a couple. I think one person that I have been following as of lately that just inspires me so much with their self-love journey. Their Instagram is called The Multifaceted Woman, and it's woman with an X. And I don't know her name, but she posts incredibly dope content around, she's an erotic dancer, so she posts incredibly dope content around just being free in her body, not giving a fuck about what people say, shutting down, especially like the male gaze, right? That might be spitting out like inappropriate comments,
Right.
sexual innuendos, whatever it may be. But she stands so firmly in just her identity, her relationship with her body, and her career as an erotic dancer, and owns that shit. So I think that has been incredibly empowering just to see, I think, the duality there, because I think sometimes we're taught, oh, you need to be this thing and you can't do this other thing. Well, it's like, I can work a 9 to 5 and also fuck it up on the dance floor in some heels. They
Yes.
can come together. So you tell our society trying to tell us that you have to be one thing over the other, I think is just such a disgrace to all the layers that we are as humans. So I wanted to shout her out because I think she's been just a really dope page I've been following lately. The Unplugged Collective is another really, really incredible space for specifically like Black women, trans, non-binary, around mental health and around body image. And then my dance community, wanted to shout them out. My teacher, her name is Vibe With Me. She's created a really magical community of women here in the Bay Area. So there's a few of us training under a team called Vibe Society, and they also have a team of choreographers that we train under. So just a team of badass women who want to dance it out together and make the world a better place and leave it better than we left
Yeah.
it.
Yes. Going back to the comment you made about how society feels like we have to be one thing or the other. One of my favorite podcasts, called This Should Be in a Book by Dana Grant. She talks about that in one of her episodes where she was sort of discussing the controversy over WAP. And the episode, if you guys want to listen to the
I
if you
would
guys
love
want
to
to listen
hear
to
that.
that episode,
I was just talking about this.
yes, the episode is called what I think it's Honey, I Swallowed the Kids or something. But the podcast is called This Should Be in a Book, and she discussed it in that episode, and I was just like, serve us all of it. Yes. So if you guys want to listen to that, you can. And we did have a question come through. A genuine gentleman said, "Are there any good therapists for Black men in Oakland? He's been looking and can't find one." And I don't live in Oakland, so I guess that goes to you.
um, yeah, it's funny, a few friends of mine have asked me this. I don't know any specifically off the top of my head, but there is a woman, I want to say her name on Instagram is called The Bay Therapist. And I follow her just to get like feel good content around mental health. But she also is a Bay Area native and posts a ton of content around mental health and resources. So I would say check out her page. I'm pretty sure it's called at the Bay Therapist. And then there was someone that joined earlier too, who's not in the Bay, but based in New York. And he's been leading some like mental health all men groups where they talk about like bell hooks, like books, or come together about, why is Tory Lanez fucking with Megan Thee Stallion? Like, come on, like Black men, protect Black women. Let's do better, right? So I think there's also organic communities popping up like that where they might be more free and affordable. But yeah, I don't know any off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but hopefully those helped.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Katrina, for joining this live. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you for first even like responding to the email. And thank you for all the content you brought to this live. It was very much needed. I'm pretty sure someone out there will gain so much from this conversation.
Yeah,
So
no, thank
thank
you for
you.
leading this. And I mean, I don't want to give into ageism because I feel like people come at me all the time talking about you look 18. But when you said you're about to turn 19, I'm like, yes, and you're leading this page and creating this community. Like, shout out to you. That's incredible. And thank you
Thank
for reaching out.
you. Yes, thank you. Well, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Thank you to everyone who joined, and thank you to everyone who will watch it later, either via IGTV or YouTube. And that's all for today.
All right. Bye, Kourtney. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. So, also, if you are a Black person and you love yourself, I urge you to go out and vote for, well, we obviously know who we ain't voting for, but go out and vote, period. That's all. Bye.